And now, the survival show that once survived being bound and gagged and loved every minute of it. In this episode, we sit down with Jason Hanson of Spy Escape and Evasion. He's going to share with us some of his CIA training that may just save your life. Howdy, and welcome to In the Rabbit Hole's Urban Survival Podcast. This is episode number 166. I'm your host, Aaron, and you are in the rabbit hole, safe and sound. Jason, welcome to In the Rabbit Hole.
Thank you. My pleasure.
It is great to talk to you today, and I'm excited about this interview because it's a little different, I think, than what we normally do, given your history. But I do want to make one quick apology to the listeners. I am suffering from seasonal allergies today for the first time in my life, and I am a snot faucet, so you may hear me sniffling and my voice is weird and everything else, or I'm also, hopped up on whatever allergy medications they are, so I may be a little loopy today. So, but I think we'll get into this, and Jason, I'm looking forward to this day. Now, for the listeners, you're former CIA, as we said in the intro and everything else, and when people hear about the CIA, they think of movies like Mission Impossible, and they think of characters like Jason Bourne, but is the life of the average CIA case officer really like that?
Well, obviously not. It's probably 99% hard work and 1% excitement. So I'm drawing a blank on the quote. 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. So obviously, the movie executives have to sell tickets. They want to sell Jason Bourne and Mission Impossible. So if it was really shown exactly what it was like, you wouldn't sell many movie tickets.
Yeah, and I'm sure in a lot of ways y'all are pretty happy about that, because otherwise that would be a lot of running foot chases for y'all, and that just seems like a lot of hassle.
Well, if it were like Mission Impossible, that mean you would have screwed up. So if you ever have to draw your gun, or you're ever driving through a city, destroying the city, that means something horribly went wrong, and that's not a good thing.
That's an interesting point. It was funny. There was a show. I just went totally blank. Covert Affairs, and that was early on. They showed in the TV show that while she was going through her training, like one of the other guys that I think was like an ex-Marine or something, it's a course where they're supposed to go through and evade the bad guys, and the Marine jumps in and just starts shooting up the simulation and everything else, and he's like, you failed, and then she goes through and doesn't shoot anything, and he's like, you pass. So I guess it's actually, that was a little more true to life, it sounds like.
Yeah, you want to be in and out without anybody noticing you or anything being disturbed. Mm-hmm. So that's when you've done things right.
So let's go back in time a little bit. How did you come to all this? Where did this start for you?
So I was born and raised in the Washington, D.C. area. And as everybody knows, there's a gazillion and one government agencies there. And so I actually applied to a lot of them. And the CIA and the Secret Service both offered me jobs. I went with the agency because I thought it would be more exciting. And I spent about 6.5 years with the agency.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What was your childhood like? Why was law enforcement so attractive to you?
Well, I always loved the outdoors. I'm an Eagle Scout, which meant I spent a lot of times hiking and camping and shooting BB guns and doing all that boy stuff that most of us love. Mm-hmm. And so in college, like many college students, I had no idea what I really wanted to be when I grew up, but I needed a job because I would soon be graduating. And I knew I didn't want to be sitting in some desk job pushing papers for the next 40 years. And so doing something, the CIA, Secret Service, FBI, like I said, I applied to many government agencies, and CIA, again, was the one that was the top choice of mine. And so I went with them. Great place to work. They treat you very, very well. So nothing bad about it. Mm-hmm. But, after doing some time, anybody will tell you it's a single man's game. And at the time I was single, I now have a wife and 3 kids. So I had a wonderful time. But I left in 2010 because it was ready for me to do different things in life.
Was it just kind of not a good fit for you anymore? Or was it really just, hey, I'd like to settle down and have a family, so this isn't really conducive to that?
Well, I wanted to settle down and have a family. Plus, I wanted to go out on my own. So I've always had the entrepreneurial bug. So I wanted to start my own business. I didn't want to work for the government the entire time because that kind of crushes your entrepreneurial spirit, obviously.
I'm sure, yeah.
And so when I left the agency, I started the company I do now, which is security, survival, all the spy stuff that I can share with the public. So it was a perfect natural fit for when I left the government.
Mm-hmm. A moment ago we were talking about how, or you were sharing with us that it's really not that exciting. But I guess from what makes you an authority on this subject, how extensive was the training? At least, what you can tell us about without killing us all. How extensive is the actual training? And I mean, is it a rigorous process where they make you keep up those skills or?
Yeah, I mean, the training is fantastic. I mean, that's obviously one of the best things. So before I went to the agency, I knew how to shoot, but I was not a great shot by any means.
Mm.
So the firearms training, the hand-to-hand self-defense, the evasive driving, I mean, you get a little taste of everything. So I certainly wouldn't have the skills I have today if it weren't for it. So that's one of the biggest blessings is those are skills that I now teach people, but also skills I'll have for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. So give us a sample here. What kind of skills did you end up walking away with?
Well, as I said, firearms training.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, I was an Eagle Scout, knew how to shoot, been taught by family members. But once you actually get taught by the pros, you learn the big difference of, whoa, I thought I knew how to shoot, but now I know the real techniques.
Uh-huh.
So all that stuff, and not just shooting at paper targets, but doing simunitions, force-on-force stuff, intense scenarios and situations that really get you out of your comfort zone and teach you a lot. So firearms training, amazing. Knife defense training. So hopefully you're never going to have to use a knife to stop somebody or defend yourself. But I was trained on that, and the knife is a great backup tool, and most of us carry a knife anyway. And then evasive driving. So I now teach an evasive driving course, and the evasive driving it's something all of us should know because all of us spend a lot of time behind the wheel. I mean, most of us 7 days a week are driving. Mm-hmm. So how to properly ram a car, how to evade a carjacking, how to disarm someone if they pull a knife or a gun on you during a carjacking. So it really runs the gamut of things.
Okay. So what would you say the most important thing you learned from the CIA?
Well, the most important thing I learned, and many of your listeners are probably going to be familiar with it, and it's the foundation of everything else, and that's situational awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not aware, it doesn't matter if you're a great shot with a gun because you'll never see the threat coming. You'll never draw your gun in time. Mm-hmm. If you're not aware, you'll never see that carjacker and you'll be dead and never have a chance to use your evasive driving moves. So really remaining in condition yellow, which is Jeff Cooper's color code, and having your head up, being aware of your surroundings, that's the most important thing. And the great thing about working for the agency is that was something that you couldn't take for granted. So it's not like most people who leave their office or leave their house every morning and it's like, I really don't have to pay attention. There were dire consequences. So you really did it. And I've carried that with me ever since. But that allows you to spot threats and dangers ahead of time. So if your head is down, if you're texting, if you can't see that threat coming, then nothing really else matters.
Yeah. Jason, let's take a quick break for this message. Listeners, ITRH is kept on the air by support from listeners just like you. Visit itrh.net today to find out about the cool survival benefits ITRH Roving Horde Armada members get. Again, that's itrh.net. Now, back to Jason. So do you put your students through any kind of simulations to drive that home? Or because it's one thing, I mean, we can just say, hey, it's really important to be aware. You might die if you're not, but how do you really get that across and really drive that home for people?
Sure. So my flagship training is a 2-day spy course called Spy Escape and Evasion. And on day 2, we do a field exercise. So very similar to things I was trained on in the past, where you have a series of missions to do in a city. You've got people hunting you, tracking you, running surveillance, and you need to see if you can do these missions without getting picked up, without getting caught. And you very quickly learn what it's like to be under extreme pressure and have that situational awareness. Otherwise, you'll never make it. So it's kind of a great training and testing ground.
So what kind of people end up hiring for you this training? Are these people that identify themselves as preppers, or is just the average person who, for one reason or another, has realized they're not as safe as they thought they were?
Well, it first started out that I was mostly training high net worth individuals, executives, CEOs of companies. And they'd bring me in, they'd have me train their families and also celebrities because they were targets and they were more in the public eye. And then I was fortunate enough to go on the television show Shark Tank, and that kind of opened me up to the masses. And so now the training I'm doing is everybody and anybody. So it's your next door neighbor. It's people who realize we live in an unpredictable world and they just want to be safer. So they hire me to teach them, the spy skills or the driving or whatever it is they want to learn.
Are you seeing an uptick in people being more concerned with their safety and kind of waking up, or is it pretty steady? I'm just curious.
It seems to be. So I started my business in 2010 when I left the agency, and it's upticking every year because unfortunately every year we have more terrorist bombings, we have more active shooters. So things are just getting worse and worse and worse. Of course, the economy and the amount of debt our nation is in just get worse and worse. So every year it becomes more and more the average Joe or the person next door who just says, listen, I know something's not right in this country. I know eventually the dollars collapse or eventually something's bad is going to happen. And I want to make sure that my family and I are prepared to handle it.
So if you were, like, let's say you met a random person, why... And what would you tell them why learning about escape and evasion is important to somebody who's not maybe a major CEO or a political figure or a celebrity? Like, why does the average person need this?
Because it makes you safer in all areas of your lives. So the average crime is a crime of opportunity. It's some criminal, for instance, who has a drug addiction, and he's standing at your local mall and he's saying, I'm going to watch the entrance or the exit of this local mall, and I'm going to come and target the easiest victim. So he's sitting there saying, I'm going to attack this man. I'm going to leave this woman alone. So if you learn spy skills such as how to know if someone's following you or how to become a human lie detector so you could read the person who knocks on your door to see if, in fact, they are a vacuum cleaner salesman or they're a burglar who's just there casing your home and trying to get a glimpse inside. So it's all these different things that we can use with our family, with our friends. Heaven forbid you're ever attacked at an ATM machine if you know self-defense skills or know knife skills. So hopefully none of us are ever going to be the victim of a home invasion or none of us are ever going to be kidnapped. But it happens to thousands of Americans every day. And if it happens to you and you know these skills, well, luckily you're going to be able to go home.
Now the lie detection one's pretty interesting. How do you teach that?
So lie detection is actually not as difficult as somebody thinks. So there are many different signals, if you will, that teach lie detection. So many different things to look through. And again, it's obviously several hours that I spend on it, but I can share one of the tips with you today. That's, again, one of the many things you look for is when you ask somebody a question, you want to pay attention to the first 3 to 5 seconds of their response. So most people, or all of us actually, we're not born to lie. We are horrible liars. So if you ask somebody a question, such as, Aaron, I ask you, when's the last time you stole something?
Oh, probably when I was a little kid.
Right, exactly. And most of us have. Most of us stole candy from a supermarket when we were 7, 10 years old, did things like that. But when you ask questions like that, and I do this when I'm interviewing employees or when I'm hired to find theft or problems in a company, is honest people like you don't hesitate. They immediately come out and say, oh yeah, I stole a candy bar from the supermarket in 8th grade or 7th grade. But dishonest people, because we're not born to lie, they pause and buy time because their brain has to come up with a lie. So I'll give you a true story. As I was actually interviewing someone, and it was a woman, and I asked her this question. I said, when's the last time you stole something? And she started kind of hemming and hawing and saying, well, and I said, well, again, I was like, okay, so when's the last time you stole something? She was like, well, it was just, maybe 2 years ago. I was working for a company and I stole some office supplies to start a competing company and it didn't work out. And, went on and on and on. And clearly that's not somebody you want to work with.
Yeah.
And that's one of the easiest things that any of us can do. And let's say it's that guy knocking on your door to sell you a vacuum. You can ask him, oh, hey, how are vacuum sales today? What's the last house you sold a vacuum to? And if he is indeed a vacuum sale, you can say, oh, your neighbor 6 houses down the street if all of a sudden he looks like a deer in the headlights and he's like, well, clearly that's a con artist. So that's just one of the many things you can do to help detect deception.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What, and I guess that's a skill that ends up being applicable whether it's a vacuum cleaner salesman or negotiations at work, or anything really. So I mean, that's a pretty useful skill.
Exactly.
Since the main topic here is escape and evasion, at least for that course that you teach, what are the main topics that you touch on as far as skills that people need to survive a kidnapping?
So during the 2-day spy course, we teach people how to escape duct tape, how to escape rope, how to pick handcuffs using a bobby pin and hair barrette, teach them how to pick locks, so deadbolts, front door locks, desk locks, filing cabinets, a variety. We do teach people the lie detection, how to become a human lie detector, how to hotwire a car, some self-defense moves. So it really is kind of a baptism by fire, trying to make you very well-rounded so that you have all these skills. It can be safer, out and about.
The hot wiring of cars is interesting because I didn't think any cars after, what was it, 1982 could be really hot wired anymore.
So you're close. It's 1999. So
Okay.
yeah, after the year 2000.
Mm-hmm.
But it's incredibly simple if you know how to do it. And once you start looking for it, so when we do our field exercise that I mentioned earlier, one of the things is they have to find an older model car that they could attempt to hotwire. And I've been in every city in this country, been all over the world, and you can always find them just because there are old cars on the streets. I mean, Honda and Toyota make great cars that seem to last a very long time.
Mm-hmm. So walk us through, what is the typical, like, as far as picking locks and everything else, what is the typical, this is how you survive a kidnapping situation? Are there special techniques you give people? Are there, leave a clue behind kind of stuff? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, there's a wide variety of things. One of the things you just mentioned, actually leave a clue behind, is perfect. So we train people in a way to become a professional hostage. So if somebody tries to kidnap you, obviously you fight like crazy. You'll use any self-defense skills you have to make sure you don't get taken in that van or taken wherever they're taking you. But if, heaven forbid, you do end up and you're in the back of that van and you weren't able to escape, then you do want to leave evidence to make yourself easier to find. So you want to gag yourself so you throw up. That way you're leaving DNA and all this trace evidence. You want to cut yourself if you can. So not like cut yourself where you're going to bleed to death, but if there's a sharp edge in a corner of a room, just get a little blood. Wipe the blood under the table, not on top of the table. You want it under the table so that it's harder to find. Or if there's a piece of carpet, go to the corner of the carpet, rip up the carpet, wipe blood underneath. So you want to leave this trail. That way your family can say to the FBI, hey, John was professionally trained as a hostage. He knows to leave clues. Make sure you're ripping up the corners of carpet. Make sure you're checking underneath tables. That way the FBI just doesn't go and look around and walk out. They actually take a lot of time. So that's a very important thing to do. The other thing, or one of the other things, is try and escape within the first 24 hours, no matter what. So when you're kidnapped, of course, criminals tell you, oh, just do what we say and you'll be fine. But the problem is, after 24 hours, you're going to be a lot further from where you ended up getting kidnapped originally. So it's a lot easier to find you, or a lot easier to escape when you know the territory, when you know where you were. Plus, in those first 24 hours, you're as strong as you're probably ever going to be. So if you were trying to escape 3 months from now, you probably haven't had a lot of food and water from your captors. It's not as if they're going to take great care of you, so you'll be weak. You won't have as much energy to fight them off. Plus, if you escape, who knows where you're going to be. So try always and escape within 24 hours, if any way possible.
So that's interesting, and I think we've spoken in the past, and I think one of the interesting distinctions that we spoke about last time was making yourself, once you're taken, making yourself look like a weak target rather than a hard target, because typically we want to look like a hard target so that somebody says, oh, this is more trouble than it's worth to walk away. But you actually recommend people play like, oh, I'm just an office working pencil pushing accountant, I'm no threat to you. Why is that?
So I recommend people are a hard target, but if you get kidnapped, so if you were a hard target, if you fought like crazy and you ended up in that room or that van, that's when you switch to looking soft. And all it is an act. Because perfect example, Aaron, is if you and I got kidnapped and we couldn't fight people off, and you're sitting there cussing them out, saying, "Do you know who I am?" and yelling and screaming and fighting them, they're going to say, "Whoa, Aaron is difficult. Let's put more security on him. Let's put more zip ties. Let's put more guards." If I'm sitting there and I'm like, "Oh, please, please don't hurt me," and I'm acting very sheepish and wimpish, and I'm crying and saying, "I'm just an accountant. Leave me alone." They're like, "Whoa, this guy's a wimp. He's not causing any trouble. Just throw him in the corner." So you clearly don't want more security on you. So if you're acting, and again, remember, it's an act. If you're acting like a wimp and sheepish and not looking them in the eye and being very timid, and you're thrown in that corner while you're sitting there yelling at them, it gives me more of an opportunity to escape because there is less security on me. They're paying less attention to me.
Okay. See, and that's interesting because it does run counter to the first part of the equation. And so do they not, I guess, do they not pick up on that? Like this guy fought so hard right away and now all of a sudden he's a big pussycat. How does that work? I guess they just accept it?
Yeah, well, here's the beauty of it. Fortunately, myself, I've never been kidnapped and pray I never do.
Uh-huh.
But from the people I've talked to and the studies I've read is you're going to turn into a pussycat pretty much anyway. So, a lot of it is, even though it is an act and you're looking for that window of opportunity, is probably not going to be the toughest acting job you've ever done. But just remember though, you've got to always have your eyes open for that split second where you go from being that submissive pussycat to that killer, if you will, if that's what it takes to escape. So you've got to be able to flip that switch very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. So now you spoke a minute ago, to circle back to this, about evasive driving and everything else, and being followed, and that guy in the mall that's checking you out, trying to size you up and deciding whether or not he's going to jack you. What are some of the simple techniques that you teach for people to identify that they're being followed and what they should do if they are being followed?
So in the spy world, you have something that's called a surveillance detection route.
Okay.
And that is a very fancy way of saying just don't go from A to B. So if you thought you were being followed, you wouldn't drive from your office straight to your home because then that person would follow you home. You would go from A to B to C. That way you can actually see if you're being followed.
Mm-hmm.
So the perfect example I can give you is a woman I know. She was once in the shoe section of a Macy's or a JCPenney, some department store.
Okay.
And she said there was this guy standing there, and he was walking around looking very creepy and awkward and kept looking at her. Now, you and I both know the only men who are going to be in the shoe section are the men whose wives have dragged them there. Nobody else wants to be there.
Right.
So she said, next I walked to the perfume counter, and sure enough, 2 minutes later, this guy was at the perfume counter. Then I walked over to another section looking at women's clothes, and this guy ended up there. Well, at that point, you're being followed because he was from shoes to perfume to the woman's clothing.
Mm-hmm.
And she says at that time, she actually saw a worker for Macy's or whatever, pointed out the guy, and the guy ran out of the store.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, that's one of the smartest things you can do is, if you're in Walmart and you think you're being followed around, go from the toy section to the gun section to the baby section. And if you see that same person there, that's a good clue you're being followed and you need to get some help and make sure that you don't leave your car or leave your Walmart and go to your car where you're more secluded.
Okay. So you're forcing them into a pattern.
Exactly. You're forcing them to get out of a natural state. So walking in and out of Walmart, perfectly natural, but going to 3 different sections, the chances that same guy is going to follow you and do that is very, very, slim. So you're probably being followed.
Mm-hmm. What sort of martial arts and hand-to-hand combat do you get into?
Well, I'd probably say the closest to it is Krav Maga.
Okay.
So, it's not martial arts as in you're fighting and it's for respect and you're, trying to do something for 30 years.
Right.
It's basically, here's the way to stop or kill somebody who's about to kill you to defend yourself.
Okay.
And, it's places to strike. It's how to use the knife, or if a knife is pulled on you, how to disarm somebody with a knife. So very practical things you would only use in a deadly force situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, is that the formal way the CIA teaches? It's more of a Krav Maga style than a strict style of martial arts, or is this just what you're able to impart with people in during the class?
So it's not any type of formal martial art. It's basically, here's the best way to protect yourself, defend yourself fast, and these are the kind of deadly moves to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as if we say, this is karate, this is judo, this is Krav Maga. Here's the self-defense stuff you need to save your life.
Okay. I guess how hard is it? Because like we were talking a second ago about respect and 30 years and everything else with some of the more formal martial arts. And I know jiu-jitsu, there's one technique that's called the 7-year technique because that's how long it takes people to master it. How long does it take the typical person to pick up these moves you're talking about?
I mean, the training is for weeks upon weeks upon weeks, but the moves are relatively simple.
Okay.
So, and the reason is because in real life, when the adrenaline dump happens and you've only got a second to make a decision, you can't have complicated moves that, you need to jab the guy 30 different times and remember 27 different techniques.
Yeah.
No, it's very simple stuff. So yeah, it's purposely uncomplicated.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now I know you're a big EDC guy. What does your EDC loadout look like?
All right, so let me tell you what I've got on me right now.
Okay.
I have a SIG P238 in my pocket, and I've got Spear Gold Dot rounds in it. So love pocket guns just because they're convenient.
Yeah.
Also a big 1911 fan, so a lot of times, depending on where I'm going, I'll have a Springfield 1911 on my hip. Always have a tactical pen with me. So tactical pen, my favorite self-defense tool, just because I've flown all over the world with it. You can take it anywhere and everywhere. Plus, good to have a pen to write with.
Of course.
I have a knife clipped to my pants pocket. So just a regular folding knife. Hopefully only used for opening the mail and stuff, but you never know. I have an Escape and Evasion gun belt that I wear. And inside this gun belt, I have a handcuff key. I have a lockpick set. I have hair barrettes. I have bobby pins, a utility knife blade, and some strike anywhere matches. On my keychain, I have paracord. So paracord has amazing escape uses. Plus, you can also use it for tying things up. Also have a handcuff key on my keychain. Trying to think. I'm actually looking around. I think I mostly covered it all. It may sound like a lot of gear, but it really doesn't take up much space.
Yeah, most of that stuff's pretty small. So the paracord was interesting. I mean, everybody in the preparedness world at some point has purchased one or a case of paracord, but you said it has a lot of escape value. I've never heard of that. Tell us about that.
So paracord, yeah, most of us use it just to secure things or use it to put up a tent or a shelter. But paracord can cut through zip ties. It can cut through duct tape. It can cut through rope. So depending on where I'm traveling, like my shoes have paracord shoelaces.
Oh, okay.
If I'm traveling to some dangerous area of the world, I'll have paracord shoelaces. I'll have it in my pocket. I'll have it in my laptop bag or my briefcase or whatever I'm carrying. So it really depends on the threat level, but every bug out bag, of course, should have paracord just because if you need to use it, again, it'll saw right through zip ties and can do amazing things.
Okay. So now the pen. Tell us about the pen, because I've heard before you're a huge pen guy and you were just telling us about that. I guess, A, what kind of pen are we talking about here? And B, how hard is it to learn to use one of those?
So it's a tactical pen, and it's a regular writing pen where you can take the cap off, but it's made of a much harder metal. So you could smash out a window, you can smash through an ice block, and it's not going to break like a cheap plastic pen. And it has a nasty, sharp point. So if you had to use it, it would not feel good on the person on the receiving end. But to use it, again, everything I do, I believe, should be simple because you don't want to overcomplicate life. Is you grip the pen in the ice pick grip, your thumb is on top of the cap, and you strike down kind of like the psycho killer grip.
Okay.
And I got an email a few weeks ago, and the headline of the email said, 45 minutes ago, you saved my life. So,
oh, wow.
So, yeah, of course, I opened that, and it was this guy I trained, and he was at a gas station, and he says he got in his car, or he'd gotten out of his car, and he noticed this guy pulled up behind him at the gas station. And he said the music was blaring, and he looks at the guy and noticed the guy's crying and laughing and crying and laughing. And he says, clearly the guy's on some type of drugs. It doesn't look right. So he says the guy hops out of his car and he starts walking towards someone who's exiting or entering the gas station store and starts yelling and screaming and trying to pick a fight with them. So the guy I trained says I immediately start dialing 911, and then he starts coming at me, yelling at me, saying he's going to beat me up and do stuff. So I grab my tactical pen. I tell him to get back. He doesn't get back. So I jab him in the chest, and he falls backwards and recoils like a snake. And then the police arrive and arrest him. So you just never know when these things are going to come in handy.
Yeah, and it's a much less lethal option and probably a lot less legal hassle than had that guy just pulled out a gun and opened up on the guy.
Right, yeah. I mean, clearly there's going to be more consequences, more red tape. But most important thing is you live and you're unharmed, which fortunately this guy was.
Yeah. Now, that's a pretty compelling story. You had also said that you traveled with him, and I carried a tactical pin for a while, and I've always thought they were really interesting, but I've always been concerned with flying with him.
I've never had a problem. I mean, I'll tell you, I don't, walk up to the TSA worker and say, "Hey, is this tactical self-defense pen allowed?" What I do is I just throw it in my laptop bag. And my laptop bag, I carry on with me, so it goes right through the scanners, just like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I fly a lot, giving speeches and doing training. I travel the world for the same thing. And here in the U.S. and overseas, I've never, ever had a problem with it.
Okay. And I guess actually putting it with your laptop gives it context so that it's not just, what is this random sharp-looking object that has no context rolling around in a bag.
Right, and the thing is, too, the TSA can obviously confiscate anything. I mean, you hear the ludicrous stories of things they take.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to just put it in the cup with all my other stuff and have them say, well, like, hey, this key looks funny, or this, take a bunch of things. So yeah, I try and keep everything in my laptop bag. That way I can get it through and not have any issues.
Okay. So moving on to guns, you teach firearms training. What does that training typically look like?
So it's more dynamic training. So we shoot a lot of steel, do a lot of team drills, do a lot of, hey, here's what happens if you're with your family and you've got to get your wife out of there. So I guess the best way to phrase it is executive protection.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a client and there's a threat, you got to draw your gun and shoot with one hand while getting the client out of there. Well, that client could be your wife, your kids, kind of thing. So it's moving and shooting. It's different scenarios. It's not just standing, at a target from 3 yards and drawing and shooting 1,000 rounds without doing much else.
Yeah. Okay. A lot more dynamic. That's good stuff. Would you say more people show up with some level of firearms knowledge, or do you have more people that just have never touched a gun before and it's like, okay, here's your 0 to 60 with guns? How does that
I get a very wide variety. So if I'm doing one of my pistol courses, I may have half the class who has never shot a gun in their life, and the other half who has shot a lot and had, as you said, their uncle teach them, but are not professionals. So it really is a unique group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if I have somebody who's shot for 30 years or somebody who's brand new. I teach them the same stuff because you got to build a foundation right.
Right.
Because most of us come in, and I was this way too, is because dad taught us or grandpa taught us, we have these ways that are ingrained in us that are not correct. So you've got to start right, how to build the right foundation. And I can take people to 0 to 60 very quickly and get them shooting where they need to be.
Okay. What's the most common shooting issue you run into? Like as far as just bad habits?
The most common shooting issue is their support hand, and they don't know how to put that support hand on the gun. So they're cupping the gun, or they're trying to shoot one-handed. They're not using the thumbs forward method where they've got two hands on the gun and that support hand thumb pointing down range, with having the hand at a 45-degree angle. So that cures a lot of issues. And then a lot of people don't know how to do trigger pull properly.
Mm-hmm.
So really emphasize, this is the way you pull a trigger straight back. You need to keep that end digit parallel to you. Don't have it curved towards you where you're jerking the trigger. So the support hand and making sure they know what a smooth trigger pull is are probably the two main things.
Okay. So is it just pistols, or do you get into shotguns and rifles too, or?
I do pistols and rifles mostly. Shotguns I only do when I get a request because most people just don't want it, actually. When I used to hold open shotgun courses, nobody wanted to take them.
Interesting.
So yeah, it was interesting. So the two most popular courses I teach are the pistol and the rifle. And the rifle these days, actually, I'm getting a significant number of people who bought AR-15s just because everybody bought them, when we had the scare a while back, but nobody has shot them.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of AR-15 owners who want to know how to use the gun, who actually want to use it for home defense.
So when they show up wanting to use that for home defense, are you a proponent of using an AR for home defense, or are you more, hey, I'll teach you how to use it, but really it should be a handgun, or really it should be a shotgun? Or is there any real differentiation for you there?
Well, it depends on your home circumstances. So I personally use a handgun for home defense. I have 3 kids. Everything is locked up in a rapid access safe. I got my safe on my nightstand. So I want to be able to access it quickly. And I like the handgun because it's more easy to maneuver. So if I have to clear a house or turn a corner, I don't have to worry about somebody being around the corner grabbing the barrel of a long gun or me knocking into something in the dark. So if somebody says, hey, I'm never even going to leave the house because I don't have kids on different levels and it's just me and my wife and we can hunker down in the bedroom, well, then by all means use an AR or shotgun because you're not going around, you're not having to move. But just make sure you still know how to use it and don't, the biggest myth, of course, everybody says about the shotgun is all I got to do is rack it.
Right.
Well, no, make sure you know how to use it and you're trained on it because if you rack it and that guy's still coming through the door, you've got to be prepared to pull the trigger.
Yeah, definitely. What would you say the number one thing the average person does when they're out and about that make them a target that is kind of the big aha moment for people that attend your school?
It's what we hit on earlier. It's situational awareness. It's so many, so I get a lot of people who take my training because they want to be prepared ahead of time. But I also get a lot who unfortunately have suffered a home invasion or had something bad happen. So now they want to get the training. And the majority of those people, of course, say like, listen, I was texting, walking, had my head down, hadn't looked up. I, was sitting there on my iPad, hadn't paid attention, didn't do this and that. And so many people say, oh my gosh, you're right that I should have been in condition yellow. You're right that I should have had my head up. So it all goes back to if you have your head up, you're paying attention, you see that bad guy coming at you, you can draw your gun and stop him, or you can draw your tactical pen and jab him in the chest. So just pay attention, be alert.
And does that alertness also translate, not translate, what's the word I'm looking for? That alertness, does it tend to be apparent to the bad guys and then say, oh, this person's paying attention, that's not an easy target and move on? Or is it really a one-sided part of the equation?
No, it is absolutely two-sided. So that bad guy sees, well, this guy's walking around. He or she, they're walking with confidence. Their head is up. They've scanned and they've made eye contact with me. So a while back, and I can't remember who it was, there was this famous study where somebody went into prison and handed criminals different pictures, and they said, would you attack this man? Would you attack this woman? And what the study showed, which is pretty common sense, is it doesn't matter if it was a 4-foot tall woman, is the guys would not attack the person who was walking tall, whose head is up. They would attack the person who was slouching, whose head is down, and didn't look like they were paying attention or knew where they were going.
So the mere act, it's a two-sided equation there. The mere act of being alert and being firm and confident in your body language also is a deterrent, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, and think about it this way, and because we can always put ourselves in the shoes of a criminal. If you're at your local mall or you're at Walmart or the grocery store, as you're walking around or you're walking in and out, look around and say, man, if I was a criminal, who am I going to attack? And if you see that guy walking out with his head up, makes eye contact with you, scanning around, you're going to say no. But if you see that person, head is down, doesn't even look up to see if they're going to get run over, you're like, whoa, that person would never even see me coming. I could easily get the drop on them.
Yeah. It is amazing to me how many people I watch crossing streets while texting and never even look up from their phone to step off the sidewalk into the street and then back off the street and onto the sidewalk. It just blows my mind every time I see it.
I tell you what really annoys me is because I do training in a lot of cities. So I'll be walking down the street in New York City and you have that person almost run into you because they aren't paying attention. And it's just like, geez, pal, lucky for them, I'm, decent enough person to get out of the way, but you run into the wrong person, they may, pop you in the face.
Yeah, it was a friend of mine actually did that. He ran into a celebrity and almost, I can't remember who it was, but she was pregnant and he almost pushed her into oncoming traffic because he wasn't paying attention, just walking down the street.
Exactly.
I'm like, that's great. You would have been known as the guy who killed so and so. You're a super person.
Right.
That's awesome. To move on to the home, when it comes to the home itself, what do people do that attracts trouble, we'll say, to their home?
They have no signs of security. So just like being situationally alert and having your head up and being a hard target, we can do the exact same thing with our home. So when you go down the average street, the average home doesn't have an alarm sign. It doesn't have alarm stickers. It doesn't have motion sensor lights. Doesn't have a video camera, even if it's a fake video camera. So criminals case neighborhoods. If they're casing your neighborhood, Aaron, and you have a video camera, alarm sign, a dog bowl, whether or not you own a dog, and every other neighbor has none of this, they're going to say, whoa, I'm not going to Aaron's house because he's got the camera and he's got the alarm, and his next door neighbor has nothing. I'm going for the easy house, and that's exactly what happens.
So they're really looking for the lowest hanging fruit when they're driving through neighborhoods.
Yeah, criminals are lazy. They obviously don't want to get caught and have to deal with a large dog or getting on, your video camera. So when they see somebody who has none of that, when they go to the front door and check it and it's unlocked because they didn't bother locking it, that's obviously the houses they go to.
It's not really about whether it's the nicest house or not the nicest house on the block. It's more about what can I get away with here? What looks like this person isn't paying attention, and for all intents and purposes, if the house has its head down, kind of like a person having their head down and not paying attention.
Correct. What house can I get into the easiest and quickest and make my way out with as many goods as possible without the largest hassle and without having to worry about getting caught?
Okay. So now summer's coming up, and that's typically the time of year that a lot of people end up doing traveling, especially traveling with kids. And I do want to touch on kids in just a bit themselves, but what do we do that opens ourselves up when we're traveling?
Oh, there's so much. Let's just start with hotels. I can give you hotel tips.
Okay.
Is whether you're traveling here in the U.S. and especially overseas, is anytime you check into a hotel, the hotel representative usually asks you, Mr. Jones, how many keys would you like? Always say 2 keys. Because overseas, criminals will sit there in hotel lobbies and they'll case it. And if they see a woman go up and say 1 key, they think to themselves, whoa, this woman's probably alone. We know we can go attack her. There's going to be less people to fight off. So I travel alone the majority of the time, but no matter what, I always ask for 2 keys. That way, if anybody's listening, they hopefully think I'm with somebody else. Another thing is try and stay between the 3rd and the 6th floor of a hotel. The lower floors make it easier for a criminal to go break in and then quickly run out, get to the getaway driver. The reason you don't want to stay on floor 87 is in case there was a hotel fire. Obviously, 87 floors is a long way to get down to safety.
Yeah.
Plus, here in the U.S., fire truck ladders only go up to the 6th floor. So that's another reason to not go so high.
What would you say the most unusual skill you teach people is?
That is a great question. A lot of the skills I teach people are probably unusual. To picking handcuffs with a bobby pin and hair barrette, to some of the lie detection, to how to ram a vehicle, how to do a 180 reverse turn. So a lot of it is probably described as unusual, but for any of us, as you're walking about your day, any of us could be a carjacking victim. Any of us could, heaven forbid, be kidnapped. So although they're unusual, there have been people all over the world whose lives have been saved by these.
Going back to kids, we mentioned that a second ago. You have Spy Kids School. What? Tell us about that. That's pretty cool.
So we teach a Spy Kids course, actually, and it's for ages usually 7 to 12, but of course we have much younger kids and we do have older kids. And it's teaching them in an age-appropriate level a lot of the stuff we talked about today. So, hey, if a stranger tries to kidnap you, here's self-defense moves appropriate for your age to fight them off. Here's how you can escape duct tape. So I've taught kids as young as, 7, how to escape duct tape. So the beauty of this is when you're teaching kids, you've got to make it fun. If you just sit there and lecture, they're not going to pay attention. You're going to lose them. So if you teach them all these safety skills in a fun manner, they think it's the greatest thing in the world. So again, we're teaching them, hey, if somebody grabs your wrist, here's how you can escape somebody trying to drag you away. Or, hey, if you think somebody's following you, here's how you can pick up to see if a stranger is following you down the street. So again, it's all skills that I wish I would have been taught when I was 10 years old, but that are age appropriate. And it's funny, even my oldest child is 3, so all of my kids are very young. But I went into my 3-year-old daughter's preschool and taught them the 3-year-old version of what I just said. And kids thought it was a blast. And my daughter still like talks about it. And she's, Daddy, do the stranger thing so I can escape you. So they remember this. And, I'm obviously teaching my kids as they get older, what they can understand at their age level. But I think it's incredibly important to teach your kids some variation of this.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think in a lot of ways, they're probably bigger targets than most of us. I mean, there was just an instance the other day where a guy in the grocery store walked up, pulled the kid out of the grocery cart, put a knife to the kid's throat. And really, I think it seemed more like he was just trying to commit suicide by cop than anything. I mean, I watched the video. It happened so fast. The mom wasn't paying attention. The kid was just sitting there. Next thing you know, kid had a knife to its throat.
And actually, I saw that video. That was a terrifying video. And it just shows you how quickly things can go downhill.
Yeah, there was no precursors. It was he just like nothing. He just walked up and grabbed the kid, and the situation started. It was amazing. Wow. So yeah, you also have a book. What are people going to get out of the book?
So the book is called Spy Secrets That Can Save Your Life, and it's by Penguin. You can buy it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or any place they have books. But it teaches what I've talked about today, but of course much more in depth. So it literally tells you, here's how to pick locks. Here's exactly what you do to escape duct tape. Here's exactly what you do to properly ram a vehicle. Here's the correct speed to go. Here's the maneuver. So it's almost a manual, step-by-step guide of the things we've talked about so you can keep yourself safer.
Okay. All right. That's really neat. So it's people can either bone up before going out to the school, or if maybe they can't afford the classes, they can still access the information.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I think you just said it perfectly. I've had people who read the book and then they come to my training and it obviously helps them more, or they just read the book because they're not able to make it out to the training.
Where are your classes held?
So my 2-day spy course is held in Las Vegas, and we hold that a few times a year. And then in southern Utah, about 2.5 hours north of Vegas, we have Spy Ranch, which is 320 acres. And that's where we do our pistol courses, our evasive driving courses, and our rifle courses.
Oh, very cool. So are these all separate, or is all of the information all thrown into one day? How do you break up these classes?
Well, we have one called the Ultimate Spy Week. So the Ultimate Spy Week we do once a year, which is 1 day of driving, 1 day of shooting, 1 day of escape and evasion. But then we also have the more in-depth, where we have a 2-day pistol course, we have a 2-day rifle course, 2-day driving course, depending on how much information people want to get.
Oh, wow. What does the full-blown job cost?
So the Ultimate Spy course is $49.97, so $5,000. And that one actually is sold out for this year, which sells out very quickly. So yeah, we hold it once a year, and it's just 6 days of nonstop action.
What by comparison, what do the other classes end up running?
The other classes, so the driving course is 2 days for $1,600. So rifle courses, 2 days for $1,000. So they run the gamut, but most of the firearms training classes are $1,000 for 2 days.
Okay. Well, very cool. Well, Jason, how do people connect with you and keep up with what you're doing and see your course schedule and all that fun stuff?
The best thing they can do is go to our website, which is spyescape.com. And on that website, there's a bunch of free articles, free reports, so a lot of good information they can use.
Awesome. Very cool. And I guess the class schedule and everything is there?
Correct. Yep, they can find information about training also.
Very cool. Well, Jason, I sure appreciate having you on today and sharing all of your great spy knowledge here. It's been very interesting. We'll have to have you on again sometime in the future.
Hey, I'll be back anytime. Let me know. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. A few quick notes before we close out today. Don't skip these, as these announcements will directly benefit you. And if you don't listen, you may be a little confused coming up. Next week, April 27th, you'll start getting an extra episode every week. That's right, 2 episodes a week. ITRH is doubling down with the ITRH Book Club. The new episodes will feature an author of a prepper book or dystopian fiction book. We'll learn about them, their book, and why you may want to read it. The final episode of this season, Season 5, will be May 25th. ITRH will return August 1st for Season 6. You will be getting the now traditional summer short episodes roughly every 3 weeks while the show is on summer break. And while on summer break, I'm going to do some work in the new studio in preparation for making more videos. It's something I really would like to start doing a lot more of for y'all. In fact, I've done some videos of a few episodes as a test. They'll probably go up over the summer. For Armada members, Season 5 will be archived in one big download for y'all as always. And speaking of Armada members, ITRH is kept on the air by support from listeners just like you. Visit itrh.net today to find out about the cool survival benefits ITRH Roving Horde Armada members get. Again, that's itrh.net. With that, we wrap up episode number 166. You can get the resources and comment on this episode by going to intherabbithole.com/E66. From the Lone Star State. Till next time, stay safe and sound.